Let me start with a blonde joke. This blonde from Atlanta, Georgia, diddy bops onto an airplane with an economy class ticket, and she plops down in first class, and they can't get her to move. And finally, they're about to call security and do the hauling Chinese thing that United does so well. And the captain walks by and says, "I'll take care of this." He bends down, he whispers in her ear. She looks up at him with a startled, dull look, and she jumps up and runs back to her economy class seat. And the steward says, "Captain, that was magic. What did you do?" He said, "I told her first class wasn't going to Minneapolis." Now, there's a point to this story. In this life, we are all that blonde. All right? We're living a dream here. Now, I have a scripted speech, because otherwise it would take all day. I put 2 weeks of my life into this, and I'm glad that I did. So let me begin by thanking John and the Arlington Institute, because you essentially forced me to go back over 2,000 plus books that I have read and reviewed in the past. And I was there to reflect on two things. One, what have I learned that is of lasting value? And two, how could I have been so very wrong in accepting some of these books at face value? Much of what we are told is a lie. All of our information systems are in a state of either collapse or corruption, from the academy to government to media to nonprofits. This lecture is in part my contribution to the Second American Revolution. The original concept for this briefing was to show how a well-educated, patriotic citizen, and by the way, I've never violated, for the feds in the audience, I've never violated my secrecy agreement, other than stating as a fact that I ran a false flag operation for the CIA. That's essential to my public narrative. So how did I go from being a Marine Corps infantry officer and former CIA spy, not an agent, that's treasonous scumbags that we pay, from blind acceptance to skeptical disillusionment? Well, 2,000 plus books plus 9/11. 9/11 was a trigger for me, and David Icke has an excellent book out on that. Here in 2 columns are my before and after condition. And let me also tell you all that these slides plus these words are online. So you can just let this flow over you and then go back, and please turn off your cell phones. So you'll be able to see this later today. But this is how I started. We didn't win the War of Independence. The Freemasons won the War of Independence. We didn't win World War II. We negotiated a treaty, and Hitler exfiltrated with all of his gold, and the Nazis took over CIA and NASA, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to take you on a tour of 2,000 books, and I hope that at the end of that tour you are a different person, or at least are thinking differently. Now, I'm very impressed by the audience that John brings out, and I think you're the best possible people for me to try to communicate such ideas. Now, this is the lecture plan. It will take 90 minutes. My observations are integrated into the discussions of the books, and then I'll end with a summary of big picture type stuff. Now, I'm told I'm in a nest of Democrats, and that most of you hate Donald Trump.
Not true.
All right. Yeah, well, get over it, because he's a change agent, okay? He's a change agent. And by the way, Hillary Clinton has announced officially that Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian agent. So that pretty much sums up the state of the Democratic mindset right now. Actually, she died 4 years ago. We've been running a clone. No, I think Tulsi was setting herself up to be vice president for Trump, but Cynthia McKinney is my candidate. So let's have a conversation about the future, not the man. I do miss my library. It cost me over $500,000 to figure out that I read in 98 categories. And this is the library that I once had. I gave it up when I joined the United Nations briefly to work on a corruption commission in Guatemala. And it took 3. I'm obscenely proud of the fact that it took 3 specialist librarians from George Mason University to evaluate my library for a donation to GMU. I had no idea that I was reading in 97 nonfiction and 1 fiction category. Now, I apologize for the small print, but you will be able to blow this up later. You'll be able to easily read this slide if you go back to tinyurl.com/steele-top-books. These are the 98 categories of reading that have allowed me to do something no one else has done. No one else in the US government, for example, has actually created a holistic analytic model, integrated true cost economics, and thought about open source everything engineering, which cuts the cost of wealth, of a wealthy lifestyle by 90%. The truth teller that easily identifies any government policy or corporate product that is corrupt is the absence of true cost economics. All right, for example, automation. A true cost is lost jobs. These cell phones that we're all carrying have essentially 10 dead Chinese in each one of them from leukemia, because China is the only place where you can do Class A carcinogens with bare hands while putting the phone together. It's not possible to be an effective president or CEO if you are genuinely committed to the public interest, unless you do holistic thinking and true cost economics. And my mission in life is to get Donald Trump to implement #unrig, so that beyond Trump, we can have a Congress with 100 independents, Greens, Libertarians, and others that does evidence-based decisions in the public interest without corporate money interfering. That's what I'm about. Donald Trump is the best, fastest path to that end. So the true value of this lecture is to expose all of you to a free online resource. I had no idea I would one day end up having read over 2,000 nonfiction books in 97 categories. All of these lists, which I started doing before John asked me to do this, are free online, and they cluster, they sort all the books in interesting ways. I have tried to strike a balance between the positive and the negative. Now, here are a number of positive-oriented lists. And there's a lot of very good positive stuff out there. All of this can be accessed through my blog, phibetaiota.net, which is free with no advertising ever. Now, I also have a super list. Now, I have the equivalent of 3 graduate degrees. The first one, in international relations, I did an original graduate thesis on predicting revolution. 100% of the preconditions of revolution exist in the United States of America today. And the 2 biggest are concentration of wealth and loss of faith in the US government. All right, so we've got a lot of work to do. I don't think anyone else has done this. It's not only important for the president to understand all these negatives, to get the cabinet to work on them, but the president needs to understand the pressure points for the citizens. 70% of our citizens don't vote. They've given up. And you'll see me come back to the role of the educated citizen as we go forward. Now, I used Amazon's book ratings. I was the top Amazon reviewer for nonfiction. I was Amazon reviewer number 25 for the world for a while, until Amazon started manipulating how it does rankings and started banning people like me who were reviewing books that were critical of, for example, Zionism. I created a 6-star as a means of isolating transformative books that were cut above. You can't fail if you buy one of my 6-star books, but since so many of you have bought duplicate copies, what you all really should do is agree on each of you buying 1 book and then have a book circle one day. For this lecture, I created a 7th star. These are mind-altering, life-transformative books. Now, this was John's original plan. These are 3 books that blew my mind. And this is after I had spent 9 years as a clandestine case officer and 20 years as a Marine Corps infantry officer, most of it in the reserve. These 3 books are quite extraordinary. They cause me to wonder about the possibility that we are not being told the truth by anybody, by our government, by the academy, by media, by anybody, certainly not by religions either. I decided not to follow John's plan. Asshole. I'm talking about myself. I think I can do better for you, and I can do better for what I hope will be 1 million people that will see this video over time. Instead, I created a table of all of my reviews. I now have a Word document table with all of my reviews sortable by author, by topic, and by star rating, with a link to the review. Now, some of the links seem a little squirrely, but you can always go to my website and just look up review plus the first 2 or 3 words in the title, and you'll get right to my book review, which is a summary book review. This is my gift to myself. I don't care about all of you, but it's a gift to you too. I do care about you. I'm just being foolish. I'm going to talk about 25 world-changing books plus a second 25, and then I'm going to talk about 26 clusters of reading that contributes to the big picture. Now, it's my honor to know Judge Napolitano. I don't agree with his bashing of the president, but I do agree that the president has failed to defend the Constitution. The president of the United States is not defending the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, or the Fourth Amendment, and we need to fix that. This is the book. I read this book when I was in Afghanistan and working in Mistif A, excellent facility, 2013. This is the book that caused me to realize that the federal government, the executive, is completely out of control. We are in a state of endless war. And I'll keep coming back to Dick Cheney. But in fact, our state of endless war began with Theodore Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson. And it began with Congress and the judiciary, the Supreme Court, not doing their jobs in the balance of power scheme of things. This book by George Will is a masterwork. It is a PhD, MD, everything. This is a huge, huge book. It essentially says the same thing, that Congress has abdicated its responsibility to the federal government, which now makes what's called administrative law. The president, by the way, love him or not, has just passed 2 executive orders that are sharply reducing the ability of the federal government to make regulations without public inputs. Okay, there is pushback happening at multiple levels, and you're not going to see CNN or MSNBC or even Fox. Fox is as traitorous as CNN covering this stuff. The second backup book is Mark Levin's The Liberty Amendments, although you could also do Ron Paul's book on liberty. I believe we need to have a national conversation about the Declaration of Independence, about the Constitution, about where we're going after Trump. Until my international conference was stolen from me by the Director of National Intelligence and destroyed because they were afraid of open source everything, open source intelligence. I used to bring 800 people to Washington to listen to 80 speakers, and Tom Atlee was one of those. Tom is a pioneer in collective intelligence and direct democracy. Most of what the president and everybody else needs to know is in open source intelligence, open source information. And the single greatest resource for a free and prosperous America is an educated public. These two things go together. Now, as my backup book, Cornel West, who easily deserves some kind of Nobel Prize, although that prize has been severely diminished. I mean, they gave it to Kissinger and Obama, okay? They gave it to a little girl that was a CIA op in Pakistan, the acid girl, okay? So the prize has been diminished, but it's still the gold standard in the vernacular. Cornel West is an utterly amazing human being, and President Trump should be listening to him and respecting him. John Caputo is both a theologian and a philosopher. I've found no other work that does a better job of showing how the truth can be found only in transit by being holistic and integrating all forms of knowing, including faith and including intuition, in conversation. Truth by yourself is not great sex. The truth cannot be dictated. In the absence of the truth, you cannot have a democracy. As a supporting book, I chose Michael Sandel on public philosophy. His core point is that liberalism, root word liberty, has lost its moral voice. Values matter. Today, the Democratic Party stands for, sorry guys, pedophilia and transgenderism. That is a prescription for self-immolation. This is one of the 5 most complicated books I've ever read. Actually, 2 of the 5 most complicated books I've ever read. But any president seeking to achieve sustainable peace and prosperity would benefit from having Robert Wright as an advisor. He takes the Hegelian thesis, antithesis, and synthesis to a new level. And the bottom line is as clear as Pogo once stated. We have met the enemy, and he is us. What we have done to ourselves and to the rest of the world, not just to humans, but to animals and plant life as well, has been a crime on an epic scale. Philip Allett's book, Health of Nations, is extremely complicated. He is a libertarian at heart. The state is an immoral construct. This book, by Wayne Jett, documents beyond doubt that the Great Depression was contrived by the banks to destroy the middle class, which was seeking commensurate political power with its growth, to buy up America at Depression-level prices, and to consolidate control over the U.S. government. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt was complicit in the Great Depression. The single greatest betrayal of the U.S. government, of its citizens, by the U.S. government, of its citizens, in addition to endless wars as a profit center for the 1%, is the government's tolerance, achieved through bribery and blackmail, of market manipulation by the banks, including the manipulation of interest rates and foreign exchange rates. The banks are our enemy, not China, not Russia, not Iran, not even Zionist Israel. The banks are our enemy because the U.S. government is not doing its job. The FBI is a theatrical agency. I mean, I love some of my FBI colleagues in a manly way. I.C. Smith in particular, who was the special agent in charge of Arkansas at a time when Bill Clinton was creating new forms of crime with the CIA. But like the CIA, the FBI, 90% good people trapped in a bad system. The system is corrupt to the bone. We need some deep house cleaning. Stephen Lenman's book, How Wall Street Fleeces America, brings this story up to date. The term deep state was first used in English, taken from a Turkish rendition by Peter Dale Scott, who made his name writing about the assassination of John F. Kennedy as a deep politics or deep state activity. Kennedy managed to piss off everybody. New York money, Texas oil, the FBI, which was founded by a pedophile who took small children from the mafia's gifts and pioneered political blackmail in the United States. And of course the Israelis, because Kennedy was going to stop nuclear trigger smuggling. There were 2 Israelis in Dallas to witness the assassination. Yitzhak Rabin and Arnon Milchan. Arnon Milchan, I believe, was the theatrical producer for 9/11. And the AIG floor was the one that was preset with the explosives to create the theatrical effects as the fake airplanes went in. This book on Rule by Secrecy is one of the greatest books I've ever read until David Icke's book, which I'll come to in a minute. And it documents the use of the central banks and secret societies to rule us all. At the end, it ties in extraterrestrials. All right, and we'll talk about extraterrestrials, and in my 90-minute spy improv Ask Me Anything, we can go into some of these topics. Charles Lewis's book, 935 Lies, is not only about 9/11, but about the total loss of morality across all of our institutions without exception, including the Boy Scouts of America. And of course, the Mormons. In comparison to Dick Cheney, Bill and Hillary Clinton are second-string traitors and criminals and pedophiles. This one book documents no fewer than 23 impeachable acts by Dick Cheney, including his enabling of the Zionist false flag attack that began planning in 1988 and is known as 9/11. Dick Cheney appears to be the most nakedly amoral person in America, followed by Hillary Clinton, and both, in my view, merit indictment and trial for treason. Mike Rupert's Crossing the Rubicon joins Vice and Rule by Secrecy, as well as all of the books by Peter Dale Scott and David Ray Griffin, as core readings on the deep state and how it has hijacked the US government. This is one of the original 3 books. What opened my mind to the reality of extraterrestrials was an MIT conference and an MIT book resulting from that conference that documented abduction experiences around the world and compellingly suggested that they were telling the truth. I found Dr. Stevens Greer's books interesting as well. Then I was given a copy of this book. It is a mind blower, and I find it completely, absolutely credible. The bottom line is that the deep state is rooted in human trafficking deals with predatory stellar civilizations. But now, humanity's prayers are being answered, and some positive stellar civilizations are helping us beat back what has been going on for centuries. And remember now, pedophilia is not new. This was back with the Aztecs and the Mayans and child sacrifice and the whole bit. I mean, Afghanistan today, you still have dancing boys and so forth. George Cavallis's book, Our Universal Journey, is easily the equal of and radically complements the first book. I might also point out that if you go to Phi Beta Iota and you do a review, you'll not only get a review of the book, you'll get other links. And this particular review of the Universal Journey has all the other links to extraterrestrial stuff on my website. Okay, so I mean, literally, you can get another graduate degree just by camping on my website. And it's not me. I stand on the shoulders of thousands and thousands of others. I have about 80 regular contributors, about 8 weekly contributors, and so I'm simply curating this larger collective mind that is not my own. I think this man, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, should be an advisor to the president. He's better known as the author of Black Swan, but for presidential reflection purposes, this is the book to read. Localization is an imperative if we are to survive both unintended and contrived collapses. The president's infrastructure reboot should be reconceptualized toward sustainable localization rather than doubling down on industrial era centralization. If just-in-time supply chains go down, the USA East and West Coast run out of food in 2 weeks. By the way, I opened Hackers on Planet Earth in 1994, and I'm an elected member of Hackers Silicon Valley. Larry Page is a member. Larry's a great engineer. His ethics suck. Elinor Ostrom earned a Nobel Prize in Economics for her book, Governing the Commons, which complements this one. Only the locals know what rules make sense and how best to enforce them. And I cannot overstate the importance of the fact that we are the United States of America, not the United Mob of America. State sovereignty matters. This book was Will Durant's original PhD thesis. It is on a level with Plato's Republic and comes to the same conclusion. The education of the individual, teaching the individual to think critically and live free or die, is the core responsibility of honest government, instead of what we have today, where we're being dumbed down and drugged up. I mean, I listened to John's remarks carefully, and what he didn't tell you is that this guy that's coming next month has had problems finding a college student able to think correctly. Beyond this, ethics, not money, is the foundation for a prosperous society. And it is insane to separate political science, which is the art of corruption, from true cost economics, which is the art of connecting ends, ways, and means. As the companion book, I chose Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of Freedom. He emphasizes ethics as the heart of education and the vital role that honest history and respect for diversity play in nurturing liberty. Edgar Morin has 3 books at this level. Here are 2 of them. On Complexity, which is an indictment of everything we do now in the way of fake government, fake history, fake medicine, fake news, fake science. And his second book, Homeland Earth, which is almost an operating manual for any great leader. This is a book President Trump, or any president, could readily give to other presidents as a conversation starter. Our greatest crisis is our own inability to deal with complexity because we have allowed ignorant and corrupt bureaucracies to stovepipe everything. And I would add especially our secret intelligence community, which is retarded by design. We have shut down diversity of opinion and the ability to share knowledge across all boundaries. One of the things I'm hoping to do with my new company is create Web 3.0, which cannot be censored. No one else has produced a more succinct definition of 20 global problems and how to solve them. The author was at one time the vice president for Europe of the World Bank. We forgive him his sins. And he finds that all global institutions, without exception, are wanting, if not outright toxic. I mean, the IMF has just admitted it destroyed Colombia and Venezuela and Ecuador. Okay? The stuff that we are doing through United Nations agencies is destructive, not constructive. It's like injecting someone with syphilis to save them from the disease. The runner-up is A More Secure World, a UN publication in which Lieutenant General Brent Scowcroft, U.S. Air Force, was the U.S. representative. For the first time, the 10 high-level threats to humanity are listed and prioritized. And I see here I'm running a little bit ahead of time, so I'm going to name, and I don't think there's anyone else in Washington, D.C. that can do this. I am going to name, in priority order, the 10 high-level threats to humanity that are documented in this book, 8 of which are ignored by the U.S. intelligence community. Poverty, infectious disease, environmental degradation, interstate conflict, civil war, genocide, other atrocities, which includes trafficking in humans, proliferation, terrorism, and transnational crime. Those are the 10 high-level threats to humanity. And our cabinet agencies are perpetuating all of those threats because they work for the people receiving the U.S. taxpayer dollar, not for the U.S. taxpayer. We need an honest government, desperately. Durant is the other author that has 2 books in my top 25 lineup, top 50 lineup. This one was co-authored with his wife Ariel, and it's the summary volume for his 11-volume History of Civilization. It might also be called Story of Civilization. 11 volumes. The 2 sets of books that I did not give to George Mason University were the great books out of the University of Chicago, 53 volumes, and The History of Civilization, 11 volumes. I have not read them, but I like looking at them. Here again, the education of the individual citizen, with parents being the foundation for a child's education, not state-sponsored education, and certainly not core curriculum, is vital. He also stresses border integrity and ethnic coherence, something that both the USA and Russia have lost. Siberia is half Chinese right now. Okay? Putin is desperately losing the race. China is moving. And by the way, for those of you that are upset about Hispanics, I'm a Hispanic. My mother was born in Colombia, Spanish roots. Let me just point out that we stole everything from the Guadalupe Hidalgo line down to the border with Mexico with a war that was based on lies. Okay? They've simply recovered what we stole from them. Get over it. Once Home Depot has everything in Spanish and English, something's changed. Okay, if they have Chinese, I'm going to start to worry. Having served 9 years as a CIA clandestine case officer or spy, I did 3 back-to-back tours, 5 times the regional recruiting average, but now in retrospect I realize no one ever held me accountable for surveillance detection routes. And the CIA operates out of official installations. It's impossible to be a clandestine case officer operating out of an official installation on a US passport. You just can't do it. Okay, so we're living a dream, and I've written a very well-read post on how there are 7 CIAs, probably 10 CIAs. But the bottom line here is I think the CIA that people think is just like a theatrical CIA. And then there are these other little CIAs, including drone assassination CIA, the torture and rendition CIA, the pedophilia and drug trafficking CIA and domestic USA, the CIA that controls judges, and so forth. What does it say to you when NSA can collect every single email and every single phone call, and we still have traitors, pedophiles, and white-collar criminals? Could it be that NSA wants it that way? This book by a Russian counterintelligence officer shocked me. And it tied together so many dots that I had been seeing over time that I had not put together. One of them jumps out, and this is not from the book, but from another story, where basically the US intelligence community took over the rap industry in order to turn blacks into criminals that could be put into profit-making prisons. Okay? And we ran crack cocaine. I mean, John Deutsch was probably telling the truth when he tearfully told Los Angeles he wasn't responsible for the crack cocaine explosion. But I know for a fact that it was CIA contractors running in drugs for Blandón from Nicaragua into El Toro Air Base, where one of my Marine colonels was killed, suicided, because he was about to blow the whistle on the fact that the United States Marine Corps was the primary receiving air station for drugs from Central America, which were going into Los Angeles, where where Ricky Ross, an entrepreneur, was making $2 million a day, turning cocaine into $5 crack. Okay? We're dirty. We're dirty across the board. And that has to stop. David Talbot's The Devil's Chessboard documents the creation of the CIA as a Wall Street penetration of the US government, an organization intended to serve as the lily pad for leveraging the US military and other elements. Colonel Fletcher Pooty's The Secret Team amplifies on this. Sidney Powell, whom I'm honored to know, is in my view the best qualified person to replace Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg when the time comes. Not only has Sidney written the complete indictment of the Bush-Obama Department of Justice and the FBI as a criminal network, she is also the attorney for my most esteemed colleague Mike Flynn, and certain to get him vindicated. We have a copy of the Department of Justice memo that exonerates Flynn completely, that they don't want to give up. Now they know we have a copy. So I expect that case to break open by Thanksgiving. Justice is supposed to be about fairness. And Sidney, who quotes several of the Supremes with respect, has shown that in fact the Department of Justice today is lying to the court, and lazy, ill-qualified judges, many of them being blackmailed with pedophilia tapes, okay, are letting them get away with it. Congress has made it legal for the Department of Defense to cover up how it's spending money, which is part of covering up the secret space program, which was never authorized or appropriated by Congress. Okay, so we have some catching up to do. The runner-up book is Integrity, Good People, Bad Choices, and Life Lessons from the White House. Matt Taibbi has written 2 books that make it clear that America is now divided into 2 classes. The 1%, who can get away with multi-billion-dollar theft from the middle class and outright murder when they wish, and the 99% who are treated like cockroaches, a Zionist term used when they train our police. The divide documents how under Obama and Holder, DOJ gave up going after Wall Street and CO crime and turned it into civil penalties No one goes to jail. Instead, police are running up their budgets and their numbers by arresting black people for standing alone in front of their house at midnight. Their crime? Obstructing pedestrian traffic. I'm not making this shit up. The IRS has just admitted it's going after poor people for back taxes because they can't get the rich people. Our government is totally, totally broken in the most fundamental possible ways. Some time ago, I identified the top 5 books for the information era. These are 2 of them. I think Paul Straussman's Information Payoff and a book called The Exemplar were another 2, and I don't remember what the 5th one was. Once again, with the Knowledge Executive, we come back to a recurring theme. Education is what leaders do if they want to be the greatest president in all time, or the greatest CEO, or the greatest dean, or whatever. This book helped me to see the U.S. secret intelligence community for what it is, a naked, evil posturer that is not helpful to the president, nor good for the republic. And General Tony Zinni is on record as saying that when he was commander of Central Command, fighting 2 wars and running 12 joint task forces, most sinks are designed to have 2 task forces at a time, he got at best 4% of what he needed to know from the secret intelligence community. And what they're doing today with open source intelligence is a mockery of the term. It's old, fat, white women with young, black interns doing social media surfing. It's disgusting. Alvin Toffler became a friend and wrote a chapter built around me, The Future of the Spy, for his book, War and Anti-War. But this second book of his, Power Shift, is the book for the modern era. He makes the point that information is a good that can be shared without being lost, and it creates wealth. Privatizing government information, which is what we're doing today, is a huge mistake. And by the way, Amazon is in violation of all of its customer agreements. It is doing cross-fertilization across stovepiped databases. It is doing massive Fourth Amendment violations. And I hope the day comes when Amazon loses every single government contract it has, because this is not cool. And by the way, as with NSA, anything that's in Amazon is in Tel Aviv. Okay, so get used to it. This is one of the other most complicated books I've ever read, Consilience. This is a guy who got his start studying ants. And ants are complicated creatures. They're a whole wild-ass collective intelligence grid. He's the gold standard for documenting why education, intelligence, and research must be holistic rather than what we have now, stovepipe silos of idiocy and secrecy and corruption. As with Durant and Morin, the value is in being holistic, inclusive, open, sharing, and not reductionist or dogmatic. Peter A. Corning's book, Holistic Darwinism, another one of the most complicated books I've ever read, is easily a 7-star book. I just had to draw the line somewhere. Corning makes the case for synergy and for bioeconomics. Permaculture basically does what Monsanto tries to do by poisoning the earth by mixing different kinds of plants. Okay? Permaculture essentially allows you to raise plants without pests and without poisoning the earth. Okay? So we have completely blown it on bioeconomics. And he is pointing out that we need to understand, going back centuries, how the whole earth demands respect, demands nurturing, and we need to understand just how much damage we have done. He also makes the point that ethics is education and information on steroids. Although I have been aware that the Nazis did not really lose World War II, that Hitler and his top people escaped to Argentina with great wealth by treaty with the USA, and that we turned over CIA and NASA to the Nazis, I simply did not realize the depth and breadth of Nazi evil is manifested through mind control and human trafficking, including off-planet human trafficking, of which I have no direct knowledge. But I'm satisfied by the sources that I've examined that this is real. Microcosm and Medium by Joseph Farrell is a superb complement to the first book. Let me point out, this is one of the 3 books that John and I had originally discussed. I do want to note that there are fraudulent books out there. Bryce Taylor's Thanks for the Memories is a copycat book that names Bob Hope, and I think falsely so. And I've written a review of Thanks for the Memories that points out where she got the information and whose movie script she stole and so forth. When I started contemplating the reality that we are all chattel, I had to look it up, property, in the eyes of the 1%, we're all disposable deplorables. That includes all you Democrats. You're disposable deplorables. I had a loss of faith. I mean, I've been very gloomy, not depressed. I'm fortunate. I have a blessed life. And my wife still has a job working for the U.S. government. But she's one of the good people trapped in a bad system. But this is what President Trump needs to grasp if he is to be the greatest president ever. Until he can get 100% of our citizens and voters both educated and mobilized. There's nothing worse than an ignorant voter. Okay? I mean, that's just basically a mob. He will just be another transient politician. If Donald Trump wants to have a legacy, it has to center on including every citizen in the process. That's why #unrig matters. Okay? And on educating the citizens. I even look to see a constitutional convention one day. But first you have to educate the citizens, otherwise you'll have morons like Ralph Nader saying eliminate the Electoral College. We don't like having white people in the middle of the country having a vote, which is what that's all about, by the way. There is this massive pushback on white people who are being demonized in a manner most foul. Trump's staff is doing well, and I think he'll win the base, and I think if we don't have a major economic collapse, all of the models say he's going to be reelected. Sorry. But his campaign staff and his White House staff are not doing anything to reach blacks, independents, women, and Latinos. They're just not doing it. We need to mobilize the 70% that have given up on America and bring them back into the system, and we need to give them a Congress that represents America, not a Congress that is a two-party tyranny. I've got this great graphic of a vulture on top of the House of Culture with one red wing and one black wing and a joker's face, and the caption says, "One bird, 2 wings, same shit." Okay? That's your Congress, and you allowed it to happen. I did too. So this is the center of gravity for the Second American Revolution. People. All of them. Not just 30% of them. I was honored to know Jonathan Schnell, the author of this book. Now you're right, I am running behind time. Sort of. I selected him to teach a senior executive course until the Office of Personnel Management realized I was a radical free thinker, at which point the course was terminated. But for a while there, I was teaching senior executive wannabes. With his help, I began to understand that most wars are contrived as profit centers for the banks. And oh, by the way, the insurance companies all know about disasters before they happen. Okay, insurance is the single greatest criminal scam on the planet other than printing money. And oh, by the way, if you own a bank, you can give yourself $3 billion that you don't actually have and transfer it by SWIFT, and the other bank will accept it as if it were real. And then you can use it to buy real estate. Okay, we have a system that is just totally out of control. Now, I really love this book, Surrender to Kindness. All of you left of center types should read this book. It is heartwarming, mind-twisting. It is a definitive catalog of everything that we should have done in Afghanistan and did not do. Okay? And it goes with Marianne Williams' Politics of Love, which, by the way, I think Thom Hartmann wrote that book, but it's still a good book. Almost everything we are told about Muslims is a lie. The Zionists control our universities, our media, and our government. In fact, Zionists in the US government have recently been outed for telling universities that if they teach honest Muslim history, they will lose their federal funding. I don't make this stuff up. Benazir Bhutto, who is dead now, she was assassinated for seeking to take on the regime. Oh, by the way, Pakistan, the deal is the US military reopened the poppy fields that the Taliban had shut down. And Pakistan military processes all of that opium into number 4 heroin in the plants in Pakistan. And then the banks get their cut, okay? As does the dark side of the US government, which runs on drug money, not on the so-called budget that is scratching the bucket, or whatever the phrase is. Along with Queen Noor, who was raised in Princeton and was a US citizen at one time, whose book Leap of Faith, Memoirs of an Unexpected Life documents both the ignorance of the West of the Muslim world and the decadence and the evil of the West in Muslim eyes, Bhutto is the gold standard for reconciliation. Now let me say very clearly, I am strongly opposed to not only Sharia law, but also the Noahide laws and the Talmudic laws, which are not the Bible, okay, and any attempt to run a state by religious guidelines. Separation of state and church is absolutely vital. But the churches and the religions should not be used as forms of crowd control and as forms of dogmatic organization. This runner-up book, Culture of Critique, documents the perfidy of the Zionists and the ultra-Orthodox Jews who are actively sabotaging the U.S. government, the U.S. economy, and U.S. society. This book has been banned at Amazon but is still sold by Barnes & Noble. Okay. Oh, Jeff Bezos, by the way, I am hearing from people that Jeff Bezos is now censoring Kindle books and CreateSpace books at the word and paragraph level without telling the authors. All right, so I don't think retard is that bad a word, but if you dare use the word retard, they'll take it out. Okay? This is really amazing. People don't understand that we're in a digital gulag right now. We are not in control of our lives or our information. This is such an extraordinary book that I spent 2 weeks reading it and another 2 weeks creating a 40-page summary of the 741-page book, which you can find free online at phibetaiota.net. David is the single best author on what is not a Jewish conspiracy to take over the world. It's not even a Zionist conspiracy to take over the world. It's a satanic, I can't even pronounce the word, Sabbatarian conspiracy to take over the world. And it's worked. And they've been using the Freemasons and Opus Dei and Knights of Malta and so forth. I mean, we've had cases where a senior CIA officer who is a member of the Knights of Malta and a senior KGB officer who is a member of the Knights of Malta collaborate against their respective countries. Okay? There are loyalties above the state that our mediocre counterintelligence people are not sniffing out. In part because, and I don't think this is in the speech, so let me take a moment to say this, the National Security Agency does not provide signals intelligence support to domestic FBI counterintelligence operations or overseas clandestine operations. I once gave a bottle of scotch to the SIGINT guy in one of the countries where I was working, and I said, look, I'm one of the first 2 people on the planet assigned terrorism full-time. Why don't you give me any hits you get on these 15 targets? And the next day, I had a printout of hits on those 2 targets. I went back on the second day. I said, well, do I have to bring another bottle of scotch? He said, no, I just did it as an experiment. You're not on the authorized list for receiving support. Because at the time, Nicaragua was a 1 and terrorism was a 7. And basically NSA was not providing support to the field station to do clandestine operation spotting, assessing, recruiting, and so forth. Okay, our system doesn't work. It just does not work. It's, Bill Binney says this, it's basically a whole bunch of stovepipes whose sole objective in life is to increase their budget and get post-retirement jobs. All right, this has to change. But this is an extraordinary book. And his new book, Trigger, although it repeats a lot of the stuff that I and others have written about on 9/11, his new book, Trigger, talks about how 9/11 was, in essence, an endgame move towards subverting the whole earth, making it possible to create a police state in the United States, an endless war overseas. What's changed is Donald Trump. My best-selling Kindle is called The Accidental President. Okay, Trump did not expect to win. He did not want to win. His wife was in tears when he won. I am quite certain he spent his first 30 days thinking about how to avoid assassination. Okay, and he still has that problem. So this is an absolutely amazing book. It was not in the original 3 that John and I talked about, but certainly you should read my 40-page summary of this book, if nothing else. I didn't want to focus on Zionism. I never gave a thought to Zionism until Zionists fucked me good by killing #unrig 6 ways in 90 days. And I tell that story at tinyurl.com/Google Gestapo. Within 30 days of APEC and the ADL noticing that Cynthia McKinney and I had something that was raising $250,000 or more on the premise of #unrig, meaning America first, not Israel first, a guy started defaming me on video as a thief and a con man. I have a federal lawsuit that goes to trial in March 2020. I won't discuss it any further, but I'm quite confident that 90 videos in which I'm called a thief and a con man with no evidence are going to play well with the jury. I had over 450 documented cyber stalkers who tried to close down my funding channels at PayPal and Indiegogo and told every interviewer that had ever interviewed me in history that I was a thief and a con man. They reported all of my websites as pornographic websites. They gamed the system so that then you're automatically not accessible from universities and governments and so forth. Meetup canceled my $77,000 paid program with a meetup in each of 435 congressional districts. At the same time that Meetup was waiving the fees for 1,087 #resist meetups, co-sponsored by, wait for it, the Anti-Defamation League. Okay? And then there was something else in there. But the bottom line is literally #unrig became public enemy #1 for the Zionist lobby in the United States of America. Boy, did they get my attention. And I will be back. This book, I'm hoping to get a grant soon. This book is going to be translated into Arabic, Chinese, Farsi, French, Russian, Spanish, and Turkish. And we're going to put this book all over the world. This is the book that makes the absolute case, along with Shlomo San's The Invention of the State of Israel, that Palestine needs to return to the Palestinians. If there were one single point of intervention on this planet to spark goodness and consciousness and righteousness returning, it's restoring Palestine to the Palestinians. Not that I give a shit about the Palestinians. Just as a practical matter, this is the cancerous sore on the whole earth, in my personal view. And by the way, Harry Truman was bribed to accept this, and Winston Churchill was bribed to make this happen. Every single American in military, diplomatic, and commercial positions told Harry Truman, this is going to create a 200-year problem. And Truman still went with it. Okay? We need to start making evidence-based decisions.